Hey guys, my name is Matsumo, and welcome to our episode of Sunday Mailbox. This is a video series where you, the viewer, can submit your gaming-related questions, and then I will give my humble opinion on them. To get the formalities out of the way real quick, if you would like to submit your own question that could be featured in an upcoming episode, you can do so by leaving a comment down below, or by sending me a Facebook and Twitter message. The first question for today comes from Tyler, and it is, do you think that Mute needs an ACOG scope? This has been a topic of discussion for quite some time in the community because while I think that people find him to be a decent operator, he's got a strong gadget, the one thing that does hold him back and leaves a bit to be desired is his weapon. If all of a sudden he had access to an ACOG scope, like that would be a significant upgrade and we'd see a lot more Mute players running around. The thing is though, is I don't know if this is the way we want to go about upgrading specific operators. There are very few people on defense that have access to this customization option. This was done on purpose, or imagine it was done on purpose, so that first of all, there was a distinction between offense and defense. Offense get access to the ACOGs, they're more long range, they've got the higher power weapons, and then defense is going to be more close quarter combats. This was also probably a subtle way to make certain operators more appealing. Doc, Rook, and Echo, for example, all have access to them, and so that might be a reason why people will start to gravitate towards those guys to be those anchors. I also have a suspicion that this is also a reason why a lot of people play as Jaeger and Bandit all the time, because while yes, they've got great guns, it's also because they have the precision of the ACOG scope. And so if all of a sudden they started to give Mute an ACOG, well then why not give Castle an ACOG? He's a little bit underpowered right now. A lot of people find him to be a bit underwhelming. You give him an ACOG scope, like that would be a significant upgrade, and that might put him more in line with some of the other operators in the game right now and make him more appealing. Why don't we start to do that? And so personally, the way that I would like to see it done is that if someone needs a slight buff, well then upgrade their kit. Is their gadget underperforming? Maybe it needs a slight upgrade. Is their weapon not on par with all the other weapons in the game? Maybe it needs to do more damage or slightly reduce its recoil so it's more manageable and easier to line up those headshots. That would be a better way of going about it instead of having a large sweeping change like giving them an ACOG scope. If all of a sudden you give them that big of an upgrade, that could actually shift the dynamic and shift the balance, and all of a sudden now that operator might be too good and they need to go back on in and nerf maybe some other aspect of Mutes. A really good example of this is Glaz. When Glaz first got access to his thermal optic, he hit incredibly hard, he was 1 and 2 shotting people, and of course he knew exactly where you were because of that thermal scope. Ubisoft realized that this was a bit too much, and instead of eliminating the thermal optic, they kept that. They nerfed his damage significantly. He no longer hits nearly as hard as he used to be. And so if you were someone who loved playing as Glaz before he got the thermal optic, you had no problem acquiring targets, but you love that damage, you're now left with kind of a neutered gun, and that's going to leave a sour taste in your mouth. And while I'm not saying it's going to be as dramatic if you gave an ACOG scope to Mute, that kind of gives you a direct idea of what could occur because of these large sweeping changes. And so would I be opposed to Mute getting a ACOG scope? Probably not. I don't think it'd be the end of the world, but hopefully you can kind of see where I'm coming from. The next question comes from NJR, and it is, what do you think of the idea that if you get MVP at the end of the round, you get an alpha pack or extra renown? Well, I can absolutely see where you're coming from. If you're MVP, why don't you deserve a bit more? Maybe a little bit more renown? Hey, you did great, you pulled or you carried your team to victory, why don't you get a bit extra at the very end of the game? That doesn't seem unreasonable. As for the alpha pack though, I think that's pushing things way too far. First of all, this would get people to literally fight over that MVP spots. Now, that might not sound awful. Some of you are probably thinking, what's the issue here? If everyone's striving to be the best, if everyone's striving to do everything they can to win, to get that MVP, why would that be a problem? Well, this would probably lead to some very unsavory tactics. I would not be surprised if a bunch of friends queued up together, they noticed that the random on their team was at the top of the scoreboard, and then one of them says, hey, you want to team kill that guy at the start of the round? I'm second place. He's dead. He can't get any more points. Maybe if I get a couple more kills, I can overtake him for that MVP and get that alpha pack. Sure, not everyone's going to do that. Not everyone is going to resort to that kind of a tactic, but I would not be surprised if that would be the result of implementing that kind of a system. We would also probably get people that would gravitate towards certain operators to maximize the amount of points that they're getting. People would play as Twitch not because they want to use her drone to take out gadgets and cameras, they might do that, but really just to focus on tagging the enemy or as many enemies at the start of the round as they possibly can, so that when that target dies, or if they die, they get assist points for that. You actually get more assist points, you get more points total than if you just killed a person by yourself. And so if someone on your team has like 15 assists by the end of the game, they're probably gonna be at the top of the scoreboard simply because they're playing as Twitch. They didn't really do a whole lot to deserve that. They just kind of tagged a couple people when they were playing on offense, but they're at the top of the scoreboard. Not exactly what we're looking for. And so while I can see where you're coming from, I get that you want to reward players who did well, you want to incentivize people to reach the top of the scoreboard, and while I don't think that giving a bit more renown would be that much of a problem, do we want to run the risk? Not everyone would resort to these kind of tactics, but you know people like to maximize as much as they can in any video game, and they're going to do whatever they can to reach the top of the scoreboard if there is an incentive there, and I don't necessarily think that that would be a good thing. But of course, that is just my 2 cents. The next question comes from Jack, and it is, what are your thoughts on a defensive operator in Rainbow Six Siege where they can roll out Kevlar mats on the floor to protect them from above and below? Honestly, that's not a bad idea. As we all know, vertical combat is a pretty big deal in Rainbow Six Siege. If you're on a certain objective, more often than not, you're gonna have a buck or a sledge directly above you, opening a bunch of holes, making it very challenging for you to defend from that location. And so if you had the option to lay out some sorts of reinforcement or a Kevlar map or whatever you want to call it above the objective room, that could make camping from certain spots or defending from those locations a lot more viable. Would this new operator be effective on every map? Absolutely not. He would be much more specialized. If you were playing on Favela, for example, he would be completely worthless. There is absolutely no vertical gameplay there other than the hatches. I mean, yes, there is the hatch combat, but there are no destructible floors or ceilings on that map because everything else is destructible. But on certain objectives like on Consulate, this could be really effective. The only thing I can think of for why we may never get an operator like this, though, is I would imagine that this would be very difficult from a technical standpoint to implement this gadget properly. You guys know how difficult it is to place down Tachanka's turret in a room. Now imagine trying to place down a large mat in the exact location that you want it to be. That doesn't sound like an easy task. I mean, most rooms are filled with objects. Of course they're filled with objects. They're not just void of anything. You can't just enter into a room that has nothing in it, place down the map exactly where you want it to be, and you're good to go. There's chairs, desks, sofas everywhere. And so how is Ubisoft going to be able to add this into the game and reliably add into the game where you can just run up to the exact place that you want, roll it out perfectly, and they're good, and then you're good to go? If we're having the problems that we have with Tachanka right now of just placing down a small little turret, now imagine laying out like a 10x10 or a 5x5 mat. I just don't see that being reasonable. Maybe they could make this map reinforcement work where it just ignores every object and you can place it wherever you want as long as it's not too close to walls. Maybe that'd be one way of going about it, but I just don't think that that would be very easy for them to implement. And so yeah, I like the idea. I just don't see it happening anytime in the near future. The next question is, should IQ's gadget be able to detect laser sights? So normally I'm all in favor of giving IQ an upgrade. I think that she is a lot better than she used to be. Her gadget is significantly better than it was at the start of Rainbow Six Siege. But I feel like this would be pushing things too far. Whenever I play as IQ and I know the enemy has a pulse, I get excited. I love shooting him through the face. I love switching that dynamic on its head. He thinks he has the advantage. I am actually the one with the advantage with my gadget. And I love that kind of combat. Now imagine always knowing where the enemy is if they have a laser sight and they can't turn it off. On top of that, I don't think the laser sight is that good to warrant that large of a disadvantage. You already have to watch out for the red dot. If the enemy is observant and you're not really watching where you're aiming, they can see that red dot giving away your position. Like, that already seems reasonable enough. If all of a sudden you now had to worry about IQ constantly shooting you through walls or knowing exactly where you were at all times, like, that just seems blatantly overpowered. That would completely destroy anyone wanting to play or use that customization option. and I just don't think that that is necessary. And so while normally I'm all for giving IQ buffs, I just don't think that this is the right way to handle it. But yeah, guys, that is about it for today's episode of Sunday Mailbox. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you thought about what we discussed in today's video. Do you like the idea of giving MVP alpha packs at the end of the round? Do you like the idea of adding in a Kevlar mat to protect from destruction from above and below? Let me know down below in the comments. As always, if you would like to submit your own question for an upcoming episode, you can also leave a comment down below or by sending me a Facebook and Twitter message. But until tomorrow, guys, have a good one and take it easy.